He was born beneath the gray skies of Berlin in 1769, a child of privilege, yet restless from the very start. Alexander von Humboldt's father served in the Prussian court, and his mother, a woman of wealth and strict order, expected him to follow a bureaucratic path. But inside the young boy's mind lived a storm, a need to know how the world truly worked, not through books alone, but through touch, smell, and sight. He would one day become known as the man who measured the world, but in his earliest years he was simply a boy who could not stop asking why. When most children played with toys, Humboldt filled jars with insects, drew maps of nearby fields, and built small instruments to record temperature, moisture, and air pressure. He was fascinated by life in all its forms, how mosses clung to rock, how ants built their colonies, how rivers carved land. While his tutors drilled Latin and mathematics into him, Humboldt's imagination already stretched toward jungles, oceans, and mountains he had never seen. Berlin in the late 18th century was a city of ideas. The Enlightenment was transforming Europe, and new thinkers were questioning the universe. Humboldt found inspiration in the works of naturalists like Buffon and geographers like Ritter. Yet his life seemed destined for administration, not adventure. After his father's death, his mother insisted he join the civil service. Alexander obeyed, but only outwardly. Inside, a plan was forming. During his early career as a mining inspector, Humboldt displayed astonishing skill. He mapped underground tunnels, designed better ventilation systems, and improved miners' safety. But he used every chance to conduct his own scientific experiments. He collected rocks, studied fossils, and carried instruments to measure magnetic fields deep beneath the earth. His notebooks filled with observations, not only numbers, but also reflections on how all things seem connected: plants, rocks, climate, and even human culture. Then came a turning point. In 1796, his mother died, leaving him a substantial inheritance. For the first time, Alexander von Humboldt was free. He resigned from his government post, gathered his instruments, thermometers, barometers, sextants, and telescopes, and began preparing for a grand journey that would take him across oceans. But Europe was at war. Napoleon's armies made travel difficult, and Humboldt faced endless refusals from colonial powers. At last, fortune smiled. In 1799, he met Aimé Bonpland, a French botanist with a kindred spirit. Together, they obtained permission from Spain to explore its colonies in the Americas. Their destination, South America, a vast, largely unmapped land of jungles, volcanoes, and rivers few Europeans had ever seen. On a summer day in June 1799, their ship Pizarro left the port of La Coruña and sailed into the Atlantic. Humboldt stood on deck as Europe disappeared behind him, feeling that his life was finally beginning. He wrote in his journal, "The most dangerous worldview is the worldview of those who have not viewed the world." Weeks later, they reached the coast of Venezuela. The heat was immense. The forest shimmered with life. Everywhere he looked, Humboldt saw motion. Plants competing for light, insects building towers, birds flashing like sparks among leaves. The air smelled of resin and decay. The soil teemed with worms. He felt as if the earth itself was breathing. Carrying his instruments through swamps and forests, Humboldt began to measure everything: temperature, humidity, altitude, the inclination of the magnetic needle. But beyond data, he observed relationships, how vegetation changed with elevation, how climate shaped the growth of species. To him, nature was not chaos, it was a living web. Bonpland and Humboldt made their way along the Orinoco River, seeking the mysterious waterway rumored to connect it with the Amazon. The journey was brutal. Mosquitoes swarmed, food rotted, and their guides sometimes deserted them. Yet each hardship seemed to push Humboldt deeper into wonder. At night, he would gaze at the Southern Cross blazing above the jungle canopy, realizing that he stood under constellations unknown in his homeland. They traveled by canoe for months, charting river systems and noting tribal languages. When they finally confirmed the existence of a natural canal between the Orinoco and the Amazon, Humboldt's excitement was boundless. It was one of geography's great discoveries, proof that South America's massive rivers were part of a single, interconnected system. From the sweltering jungles, they turned toward the Andes. Here the air grew thin, the trees disappeared, and the peaks glowed white with snow. Humboldt was determined to climb Chimborazo, then thought to be the highest mountain in the world. In June 1802, armed with barometers and thermometers, they began the ascent. Each step higher felt like walking into the sky. The air grew bitter cold. Their breath turned to mist. Humboldt measured pressure and temperature at every level, taking notes even as blood trickled from his nose. At 19,000 feet, they could go no farther. Standing amid the clouds, Humboldt looked down upon the curving earth below and saw what no one had seen before. The zones of vegetation stacked like layers of a living organism. From tropical forest to alpine moss, life arranged itself by altitude, just as it did by latitude around the globe. That revelation changed science forever. He had discovered a law of nature, the unity of life across the planet. When they returned to Quito, Humboldt's notebooks overflowed with observations. He recorded volcanic activity, collected plants, and studied magnetic variation. Wherever he went, he shared his passion with locals and scientists alike, urging them to see nature not as something to conquer, but as something to understand. As the years of exploration continued, the two men mapped parts of Peru, Colombia, and Cuba, measuring tides, collecting animal species, and describing indigenous cultures with unusual respect for the era. Humboldt's approach was revolutionary. He valued native knowledge and saw human societies as part of the same ecological system as the forests and rivers around them. By 1804, after 5 years and over 6,000 miles of travel, Humboldt and Bonpland reached the United States. In Philadelphia, they met President Thomas Jefferson, who listened with fascination as Humboldt described South America's vast natural wealth and geography. Jefferson later said Humboldt's account was more detailed than any he had heard from Spanish officials. Standing on the deck of his returning ship, watching Europe appear on the horizon once again, Humboldt was transformed. He had left as an eager young naturalist and returned as one of the greatest explorers in history. His journals, filled with data, sketches, and maps, would take decades to analyze. Yet he already knew his work had only begun. He had seen the planet's pulse, and he would dedicate his life to explaining how it all connected. As Humboldt settled back in Europe after his South American expedition, the world he had seen seemed almost unimaginable to those who had stayed behind. Mountains taller than any in Europe, rivers wider than any known, and forests teeming with species never described in scientific literature, all had been measured, cataloged, and recorded in meticulous detail. Yet Humboldt was restless. He understood that collecting data was only the beginning. The challenge was to interpret it, to reveal the hidden order of nature that connected land, water, climate, and life itself. He began by analyzing the magnetic measurements he had taken along the equator and the Andes. Using his portable instruments, he had recorded variations in the magnetic needle across latitude, discovering that the Earth itself behaved like a giant magnet. Humboldt theorized that these variations could explain patterns in navigation and ocean currents, laying the groundwork for modern geomagnetism. He combined this with his careful observations of winds, tides, and temperatures, illustrating the interconnectedness of planetary forces in a way that few had attempted before. His studies of flora were equally revolutionary. Humboldt noted that plants were distributed according to both latitude and altitude. an insight that linked tropical jungles with alpine slopes in a continuous ecological spectrum. By systematically cataloging these relationships, he created the first concept of biogeography, a scientific approach to understanding where and why species live where they do. Each observation he made was accompanied by precise measurements of temperature, humidity, and elevation, revealing patterns that had eluded even the most diligent naturalists of his time. Humboldt's approach was remarkable because he sought not just to classify, but to connect. He saw climate, vegetation, and geology as part of an integrated whole. In the Andes, he had observed glaciers melting into rivers, carrying nutrients into lower valleys where agriculture could thrive. On the Orinoco, he had traced the flow of tributaries, connecting them to rainfall patterns and seasonal cycles. Everywhere he looked, he saw interdependence, and he documented it with the precision of a mathematician and the imagination of a poet. Europe's scientific community received his work with awe. In Paris, Humboldt collaborated with leading scientists to publish his findings, producing extensive volumes filled with maps, botanical illustrations, and analyses of atmospheric pressure and magnetism. He presented not only facts but visualizations, detailed hand-drawn charts that conveyed the interconnectedness of the world. His methods inspired contemporaries such as Georges Cuvier and Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who would go on to advance biology and geology. Humboldt's insight was clear. The world could be measured, mapped, and understood, but only by considering nature as a single, living system. Yet it was not just scientific circles that took notice. Humboldt's writings captivated the public, blending rigorous analysis with vivid narrative. He described the smell of tropical flowers, the color of birds' feathers, the sound of waterfalls echoing through valleys, and the courage of indigenous guides navigating treacherous terrain. He conveyed both data and experience, making readers feel as though they, too, were journeying along the Amazon or climbing Chimborazo. This combination of scientific rigor and literary skill became a hallmark of his work and ensured his influence extended far beyond the academy. Humboldt's reputation grew internationally. In 1804, he visited the United States, where he was greeted by Thomas Jefferson and other leading intellectuals. They were fascinated by his accounts of South America's geography and the sophisticated cultures he had encountered. Humboldt argued that indigenous knowledge should not be dismissed. He had seen how native peoples used fire to manage forests, how they cultivated crops suited to the mountains, and how their navigation and understanding of rivers were far more advanced than European observers had realized. His respect for these communities was extraordinary for his era. In the following years, Humboldt embarked on smaller European expeditions, climbing mountains, measuring temperatures, and continuing to refine his maps and theories. He introduced the concept of isotherms, lines connecting points of equal temperature, providing the first graphical representation of global climate. He theorized the influence of ocean currents on weather patterns and recognized the importance of deforestation and human activity on climate, ideas far ahead of his time. In essence, he was among the first to perceive the Earth as an integrated system, a concept now central to ecology and environmental science. One of Humboldt's most influential contributions was his emphasis on detailed observation combined with broad interpretation. He argued that data without context was meaningless. Measurements were only valuable if they revealed patterns that could explain natural phenomena. This philosophy profoundly influenced young naturalists, including Charles Darwin, who studied Humboldt's writings before his voyage on the HMS Beagle. Darwin credited Humboldt with shaping his understanding of the distribution of species and the importance of empirical observation in forming scientific theories. Despite his fame, Humboldt remained humble. He traveled lightly, often alone or with only a few companions, preferring direct engagement with the natural world rather than the comforts of European salons. His journals reflected both intellectual excitement and personal reflection. He was aware of the fragile balance of ecosystems, the vulnerability of human societies to environmental change, and the deep connections between people and their landscapes. In his writings, he emphasized that the measurement of the world was not only a scientific task, but a moral and philosophical one. Humboldt also extended his reach into education and communication. He gave lectures in Berlin, Paris, and other European capitals, inspiring students, politicians, and the general public. He argued passionately for exploration, science, and the importance of observing the natural world directly. His lectures were so compelling that monarchs and scientists alike sought his guidance on matters ranging from colonial development to the management of forests and rivers. By 1827, after decades of research and travel, Humboldt began publishing his magnum opus, Cosmos, a multi-volume work that sought to describe the physical universe as a single, interconnected entity. In it, he combined astronomy, geography, geology, meteorology, and biology into a coherent vision. Cosmos was as much philosophical as scientific, urging humanity to recognize the unity of nature and the responsibility of individuals to understand and preserve it. The work became a sensation, influencing scientists, writers, and thinkers for generations, including Goethe, Darwin, and even early environmentalists. Throughout his life, Humboldt maintained correspondence with explorers, politicians, and scientists across continents. He advocated for scientific expeditions to Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, always emphasizing rigorous measurement and careful documentation. He believed that exploration was a duty of knowledge, a way to bring humanity closer to understanding the earth and its people. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Humboldt never sought conquest or wealth. His motivation was curiosity and a profound sense of wonder at the natural world. Even as he aged, Humboldt continued to explore. He climbed mountains in Europe, measured volcanic activity in Italy, and studied glaciers in the Alps. He refined his maps, updated his theories, and encouraged a new generation of scientists to venture into unknown territories. His belief in the universality of nature, that the same forces shaped mountains, rivers, forests, and climates everywhere, became the foundation of modern environmental and earth sciences. By the time of his death in 1859, at the age of 90, Humboldt had left an unparalleled legacy. He had measured mountains, mapped rivers, charted magnetic fields, cataloged thousands of plant species, and introduced revolutionary concepts in geography, climatology, and ecology. His vision of the Earth as a connected system influenced countless scientists, explorers, and writers, shaping how humanity perceives the planet even today. As Alexander von Humboldt grew older, his fame became international, yet he remained a relentless observer, ever devoted to the measurement and understanding of the natural world. Though he traveled less, his influence expanded, touching Europe, the Americas, and even Asia. His correspondence spanned continents, connecting explorers, scientists, and intellectuals in a network of shared knowledge. Humboldt believed that exploration was not merely about discovering new lands, but about understanding the hidden patterns that connected climate, geography, life, and human society. Humboldt's magnum opus, Cosmos, was not simply a catalog of discoveries. It was a philosophical vision of the universe as an interconnected system. In it, he argued that the same forces govern mountains, oceans, and the atmosphere, and that every species, from the smallest moss to the largest predator, was part of a single ecological web. His concept of unity in nature anticipated modern environmental science and ecology by over a century. Readers were captivated by his ability to combine precise scientific observation with literary elegance, describing storms, volcanic eruptions, and starry skies with the same passion he had shown in his youth. His writings inspired a generation of scientists and explorers. Charles Darwin, before boarding the HMS Beagle, studied Humboldt's accounts of the Andes, the Amazon, and the Galapagos. Darwin later credited Humboldt with shaping his understanding of biogeography and the distribution of species. Humboldt's influence extended to geography, geology, meteorology, and even the nascent field of anthropology, as he had meticulously recorded the cultures, languages, and customs of the indigenous peoples he encountered. Humboldt demonstrated that human societies were inseparable from the environments in which they lived. Throughout Europe, Humboldt was revered not just as a scientist, but as a cultural figure. Monarchs, philosophers, and poets sought his counsel. He was celebrated in salons and scientific societies, yet he remained humble and focused on his work. Even in his later years, he climbed mountains in Europe, measured glacial movements in the Alps, and continued to refine his observations. His life exemplified a belief that age was no barrier to discovery and that curiosity was a lifelong pursuit. Humboldt's legacy is multifaceted. He mapped thousands of miles of rivers, mountains, and coastlines. He introduced the concept of isotherms to understand climate. He documented volcanic activity, and he emphasized the importance of precise measurement. Yet perhaps his greatest achievement was his holistic vision of Earth. He demonstrated that the natural world could not be understood in isolated fragments. It was a single, interconnected organism, shaped by forces visible and invisible, from the drift of glaciers to the pull of the magnetic poles. Humboldt also foresaw the impact of humans on the environment. In his writings, he noted the consequences of deforestation, soil erosion, and climate alteration long before industrialization's full impact was felt. His observations hinted at the principles of modern environmentalism, showing that the same curiosity that fueled exploration could also inspire stewardship and care for the planet. While Humboldt never married, his life was filled with deep connections. His partnership with Bonpland endured beyond their shared travels. Together, they inspired others to venture into unknown lands, to collect data, and to ask questions previously unimagined. Humboldt also mentored countless young scientists, encouraging them to blend rigorous measurement with creativity and to always seek the underlying unity of natural phenomena. Even today, the echoes of Humboldt's work are everywhere. Mountains, rivers, and cities bear his name: Mount Humboldt in Antarctica, Humboldt Bay in New Guinea, the Humboldt Current off South America, and the Humboldt penguin that he described. His name is etched into the map of the world he so meticulously measured, a testament to a life devoted to understanding and recording the planet's wonders. Humboldt's influence extended far beyond cartography and natural history. He helped shape scientific methodology itself, emphasizing empirical observation, detailed measurement, and systematic recording. By insisting that knowledge be based on evidence rather than assumption, he laid the foundation for modern scientific practice. He demonstrated that exploration was not only about geographic discovery, but also about comprehending the complex relationships between climate, geology, biology, and human society. As the 19th century progressed, Humboldt's ideas fueled the work of countless explorers and scientists. Botanists, geologists, and climatologists followed the paths he had charted, refining his measurements and expanding upon his theories. Geographers adopted his holistic approach, considering not just individual features of the Earth, but their interconnectedness. Environmentalists later cited his warnings about human impact on nature as early insights into ecological balance. Humboldt died in 1859 at the age of 90. The world he left behind was profoundly changed. Maps more accurate, scientific understanding deeper, and the imagination of humanity broadened. Yet his death did not mark an end. His influence continued to spread through his publications, through the students and explorers he inspired, and through the enduring vision of Earth as an interconnected system. In the centuries that followed, Humboldt became a symbol not merely of exploration, but of the human capacity for curiosity, observation, and reflection. His life reminds us that to truly understand the world, one must measure it, record it, and respect its inherent complexity. Mountains, rivers, plants, and stars were not separate. They were threads in a single immense tapestry, and Humboldt had learned to read its patterns with unmatched clarity and grace. Today, as satellites orbit the Earth and scientists measure climate change, ocean currents, and biodiversity, Humboldt's vision remains foundational. His insistence on accuracy, his holistic perspective, and his respect for the natural world resonate with modern science. He was the first to measure the world not merely as a collection of places, but as a living, breathing entity, interconnected in ways that humans are only beginning to comprehend. In the final analysis, Alexander von Humboldt was not only a traveler of lands but a traveler of ideas. He measured more than mountains and rivers. He measured the pulse of the earth itself. He showed that observation, curiosity, and reflection could illuminate the world's secrets, and that human understanding grows when we see ourselves as part of a vast, interwoven ecosystem. And so, the man who once roamed jungles, climbed glaciers, and crossed continents leaves us with a message that transcends time. The world is vast, its wonders endless, and the pursuit of knowledge is both our responsibility and our highest adventure. In every measured peak, charted river, and mapped current, Humboldt's spirit endures. A reminder that to explore is to understand. To understand is to respect. And to respect is to safeguard the delicate web of life that binds us all.